Hello, hello, welcome everybody. I'm Jev. Yes, Triple V. The accent, by the way, is purely Kiwi. I read old stories for children, so we keep this a family-friendly channel by having bad word blockers, banning bots, and preventing spam. So that means new followers need to wait a few minutes before they can join in the chat. Since these stories are so old, they're now in the public domain, which means they are free to read for anyone and by anyone, the way many Christmas songs are. The digital versions I read are from Project Gutenberg, and you'll find the link for that below. The physical ones are just old books my family has lying around. Sometimes I'll even show them to you. These, by the way, are live reads. Think of them as bedtime stories rather than actual audiobooks. You get the benefits of my mistakes, distractions, explanations, and terrible attempts at accents, along with plenty of chat and interruptions as we find out about things in the story. If you need to do work or chores, then that's fine. Just come and lurk. Please adjust your volume to suit. There are captions available if you have to be quiet or you have hearing challenges, but be warned, sometimes the captions aren't always that accurate. I am a member of the Codex, an awesome group of reading streamers on Twitch. People from many walks of life who share their love of reading, and you'll find links to the Codex reading team and our Discord server below. A special feature of the Codex Discord is the security channel for those of you who stream or moderate. Find lots of practical, useful information to help keep your stream and your community safe. So, hang around and come discover adventure with me. You never know what we'll find.
Hello, everybody, and how are you? And welcome back. We are continuing with the last, for now, read from the Blue Fairy book by Andrew Lang. And that's because next scheduled streaming session for me is 2 days' time. So, excuse me, I need to do this because otherwise I won't be able to read it all later if my eye continues to be itchy and bothering me. So my Friday, today's Wednesday, my Friday, 2 days' time from now, I will not be here because we have a scheduled power cut because the power company are servicing the pole with the transformer outside our house. So all the little cluster of houses that are fed directly from that pole are going to be having a scheduled power cut. But having talked about that with family members, it's like, yeah, that one actually definitely needs some work on it. So it's good that they're actually doing something about it. So if they don't do the work on Friday, they'll be doing it the following Friday, in which case somehow I will let you know that next Friday also will not be happening. But if they don't do it this Friday, I'm still going to take the break. I'm just scheduling it. It's in there. We are not going to be streaming on Fridays. So the next scheduled stream for me is not happening. And no, I know I haven't actually put that on the, actually, let's do that. Yeah, I could do that now, I suppose. I'm only thinking about doing it now because otherwise I might forget to do it. So twitch.tv and then my name and then schedule. I could have actually just brought up the link and then you guys would have actually been able to use the link and I could have changed it from there. But that's what it is. So I'm going to edit that schedule and then just mark that one as being not happening that day. It's not vacation mode, it's just that particular one is not happening. Skip next stream, that's that one. Save changes. And done. So now if I refresh that page for my schedule, it should be correct. Yes, it is. It has a strike through on it saying it's cancelled, and that's the one for Friday the 30th of January in New Zealand, which is probably Thursday the 29th of January for most of you. But that's okay. So don't forget to check out the ModLearn videos. Do keep aware of bots and stuff like that that are going around impersonating accounts that are pretending to be someone that they're not. Don't trust them. Doesn't matter what they're offering you. Same goes with spam emails. Same goes with messages, direct messages elsewhere, like on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, Mastodon, X, Twitter, Reddit, what's the other one? DeviantArt. Those are the main places I know of where people get messaged. If you don't already know the person, interact with them in a public space before you interact with them in private messages. But don't even do that if you check out their profile and you don't like what you see. On social media, on short form social media, this is stuff that's not, I don't think is in the ModLearn videos, unless it's ModLearn, the one that I'm in which case I do talk a little bit about social media. But on short form social media, so that would be X, Twitter, that would be Blue Sky, that would be Mastodon as the main ones that people use. There's a lot of new accounts, and when you look at them, they might actually have a profile picture and name that looks like some famous person, and you go, oh, so-and-so's contacting me. Well, rest assured they likely aren't. And then when you look at the actual username behind it, there's usually an extra punctuation mark like an underscore or a dash that isn't in the original person's user account name. Even if it's not their screen name, the actual link name. And also, they will have very, very little or no public facing stuff on that profile. They'll say, this is my backup account that I use only for contacting people. No, that's a load of bullshit. And I'm calling it that because it is. What it is somebody has made a clone of the original account trying to dupe you into interacting with them. And then they will try to make you feel good as being a helpful person that can help them out when they have need to have. My captions, my captions are doing family friendly captioning. Anyone who's watched The Good Place will understand it using shirt instead of what it said. Anyway, it's not a word I commonly use. That's the only reason why I think it's quite funny. Anyway, so they will either try to make you feel like a good person and therefore then try to not tap you up for paying for something for them or sending them money. You know, the Nigerian prince scams, that sort of idea, but using some other hook to get you in, or selling you services to get you to get a bigger reach, to be more impressive. That's like wearing the rubber muscle suits underneath a tight-fitting t-shirt to make people think that you actually have muscles. If you do that to make it look like you have more followers. And most of those services actually say that that's illegal. So if anyone calls you into question about that or reports you, you're going to get your account suspended. They might not, because that account has already moved on to another account name, but you yourself, having used that service, may get your service suspended or banned. So don't do it. And also another thing that they do is they try to get you to click onto links for things that are really not good. Often viruses and Trojans and other things like that, which then auto spread to people that you are in contact with, your computer is in contact with. That is not good. So just don't. Don't be skeptical about people who try to contact you, who maybe somebody where you go, oh, they're contacting me. Disbelieve it. Disbelieve it. If it's a real, genuine person who is someone who is actually fairly high up there, they will talk about what they're doing publicly before they try and contact you privately. And so you'll know if it's real, that it's actually happening. And they will use their own account. Or they actually will have a management company, and the management company will have track record, and you'll be able to find them and look at them and see who they are and see what their interactions are. And if it's a management company, it will have a proper domain-based email. If it doesn't have a domain-based email, or if there's extra letters in the after the bit that comes after the @ don't go near it. It's dangerous. It's going to wreck your computer and everybody else's who connects with your computer. Okay? You've been warned. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Be clever. Don't be an idiot. I'm not saying you are an idiot. Oh my goodness, Koriki. That's so funny. He looked up loadable shirt. And the AI answer on it is hilarious. Thank you for sending that to me. I do need to save it. Oh dear, that's hilarious. Anyway, so yeah, there's your little wee mini tech rant for today. Don't forget to go and watch the ModLearn videos if you haven't already. If you consider yourself to be a viewer only, not a streamer, it's still worth having a look, because it's good to know that this is the sort of stuff that people do to look after your safety in their channels. Because the ModLearn videos, now you need a merch t-shirt that says, no, this is a loadable shirt. I like that. I need to write it down. And the reason I write it down, for people who don't know me, is my memory is terrible for a lot of things. It's much more likely to have something happen if I write it down. which is why we're going to have a tip video and after we've had the ad break. Loadable shirt merch tee. That's hilarious. Yes, I know I don't do most of those straight away, but often they do get done, especially if it's to do with commands and other things that you guys can interact with. Those will often get done. If it's to do with merch, I'm collecting ideas, and then I have to get to a place where I'm in the right headspace for actually creating the graphics for it. We'll have to go back and clip that. It's too late now. Yeah, definitely. That would be really worth doing. And it's definitely a clip that's worth sharing elsewhere too. I know one of my viewers over on YouTube is going to message me and go, I don't understand. She did that with, there's a clip that we've got of me talking about, does this look like a tech person because of the grey hair and all that sort of stuff. And I shared that over on YouTube on my shorts, and she was very confused. She's about my age or maybe even older. I don't know actually. And she's not English as a first language. And she thought I was being serious about I am not good at tech and old people are not good at tech. And I was just, when in actual fact, I was just playing with the idea that a lot of people have this preconceived notion in their heads that only young people understand technology. Does this look like someone who knows anything about tech? The reality is that I'm not great at it, but because I keep plugging away at it and reading about things and asking questions and asking for help of people who actually know, who are good at coding and stuff like that, there's a lot of tech that I do in the background of what happens here in my stream that a lot of young people, way younger than me, don't do. And the reason it's unusual is, one, I don't fit the usual typical demographic, and two, usually it's people who do heavy duty gaming who do all that sort of stuff. The really blokey streamers, you know, not the old granny style readers. Definitely not in most of the reading channels. So yeah, it's quite funny. Anyway, so we are going to have a tip video now that the ads have finished, and I'm not quite sure who we've got for today, but that would be quite fun. Doing a shirt like that and also doing that clip would be good. So who have we got for tip video today? If you haven't been here before, the tip videos are just to help you to understand things that you can put in place or do to make the most of your time here. So here we go. Who have we got today? Oh, we've got Void Android. And welcome back. And that tips video is courtesy of Void Android, and we thank them very much for providing it. Right, so what are we up to now? That's a good question. We are going to actually read some more of Andrew Lang's Blue Fairy book. I think one of my images last week or earlier this week, I actually wrote Lang I spelled it Lang incorrectly. I put an I into it because sometimes it's written Laing, not Andrew Lang, but as a surname. And in actual fact, this chap here, it's just Lang. We have a beach further north. There is a beach further north along the coast in New Zealand called Lang's Beach. Actually, is it the north one? Yes. And I can't remember which way that one's spelled. I always assume it's Lang, but it may not be. It's quite funny. You can have surnames that are pronounced exactly the same, that look quite different to each other. And then you can have names that are spelled exactly the same, but different people pronounce it completely differently. People who wear that name, who it is their name, and so therefore for them this is the correct way to say it. So anyway, what we are reading today is a story called Little Thumb, is the one we're going to start with, which I'm going to guess is the Tom Thumb story. It might be Thumbelina, but I'm guessing it's Tom Thumb. Just looking, how far through are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, and then there's a whole big long bit with Lilliput, which is probably the Gulliver's Travels. No, there's still quite a way to go before we get to the end of the book. We get the 889, page 889 is the end of the book. Come on, go to resume. And I'm at 534. So we've got another whole book length to go yet after this. Because most of the books I read are 250 to 350 pages long. So here we go. We are going to read Little Thumb from the Blue Fairy book by Andrew Lang, first published in book form in 1889 in England. Little Thumb. There was once upon a time a man and his wife, faggot makers by trade. Stop sniggering. It's actually spelt with only one G, not two. Now, a faggot maker. I'm not going to use the on-screen one here because I don't want to have a nasty surprise. In English, the word faggot is a derogatory term for a gay man, I think. I think that's the one that it's usually used for. But in this context, it means something completely different. So I'm just going to look it up just in case. It was a unit, a certain amount of something. Usually a bundle of sticks. A faggot, in the meaning of bundle, is an archaic English unit applied to bundles of certain items. Alternate spellings in early modern English. There are a whole lot of them. The one that's used here has one G, but the common spelling is actually with two Gs, which is the one that I used to always hear as a la. I can't hear you, my loadable shirt is full. I used to always hear the 2G spelling only used as a derogatory term. So, oh yeah, and I do remember hearing that some people were shocked that the English used to talk about having a fag, and what they meant was they were going to have a cigarette, they were going to have a smoke of their cigarette. Cigarettes were often nicknamed as fags. Not for the derogatory term, but possibly from this unit term, which means a bundle of sticks. Sometimes called a short faggot. A faggot of sticks equals a bundle of wood sticks or billets. Now, that is not hosting somebody when they are coming to stay with you on a school trip, when they are billeted with you. No, billets that are 3 feet in length and 2 feet in circumference. That's what it means. Oh, the French ATGM rocket is called the faggot. Probably because the shape of it, I would guess, unless it means something else in French. The measurement was standardized in ordinances in 1474. So it's actually a very technical measurement term. It's not whatever else everybody else thinks it is. A small short faggot was also called a nicket. A brush faggot, sometimes shortened to brush, was a bundle of similar size made of brushwood. Brushwood is the stuff where you get some normal branches that then split and then split and split and split and split down to narrower and narrower, twiggy little bits, and then it just gets all sort of like fluffy on the end. And that's called brush or brushwood. A long faggot of sticks equals a bundle larger than 3 feet long. There you go. Is it a long faggot or a short faggot? So when you see illustrations in old books of someone carrying a bundle of sticks on their back, that was generally referred to carrying a faggot for that particular usage. In a book on slang used at Winchester College, fire dogs were fire basket that could hold long, or andirons that could hold long faggots, and half faggots were smaller andirons that could only hold short faggots and were later converted for use with coal. So these are things that would actually be containers that those specific measures would fit into. Because fireplaces, open fireplaces, used to be a lot bigger than what they are now. So there you go. It's not a rude word at all. It also says, see also faggot food, but when it doesn't give us any other inappropriate usages. So we are going to use the word as it is written in this story. And that was a big aside, but essential for this usage. There was once upon a time a man and his wife, faggot makers by trade, who had several children, all boys. The eldest was but 10 years old, and the youngest only 7. They were very poor, and their 7 children incommoded them greatly, inconvenienced them in lots of different ways, because not one of them was able to earn his bread. Well, one is only 10 years old and the other one's only 7, and then there's whatever in between, because child labour, yes. Because not one of them was able to earn his bread. That which gave them yet more uneasiness was that the youngest was of very puny constitution. This was rewritten for children. This is the rewrite for children, and scarce ever spoke a word which made them take that for stupidity, which was a sign of good sense. He was very little, and when born, no bigger than one's thumb, which made him be called Little Thumb. We know the story as Tom Thumb. The poor child bore the blame of whatsoever was done amiss in the house, and guilty or not, was always in the wrong. He was, notwithstanding, more cunning, and had a far greater share of wisdom than all his brothers put together, and if he spake little, he heard and thought the more. There happened now to come a very bad year, and the famine was so great that these poor people resolved to rid themselves of their children. One evening, when they were all in bed and the faggot maker was sitting with his wife at the fire, he said to her with his heart ready to burst with grief, "Thou seest plainly that we are not able to keep our children, and I cannot see them starve to death before my face. I am resolved to loose them in the wood tomorrow, which may very easily be done, for while they are busy in tying up faggots," so the children do the work, "we may run away and leave them without their taking any notice." "Ah," cried his wife, "and canst thou thyself have the heart to take thy children out along with thee on purpose to lose them?" In vain did her husband represent to her their extreme poverty. She would not consent to it. She was indeed poor, but she was their mother. However, having considered what a grief it would be to her to see them perish with hunger, she at last consented, and went to bed, all in tears. Little Thumb had heard every word that had been spoken, for observing, as he lay in his bed, that they were talking very busily, he got up softly and hid himself under his father's stool, that he might hear what they said without being seen. He went to bed again, but did not sleep a wink all the rest of the night, thinking on what he had to do. He got up early in the morning and went to the riverside, where he filled his pockets full of small white pebbles, and then returned home. This is sounding more like Hansel and Gretel, which I think is one of the other book stories we're having today. This seems to have been a common theme. They all went abroad, but Little Thumb never told his brothers one syllable of what he knew. They went into a very thick forest, where they could not see one another at 10 paces distant. The faggot maker began to cut wood, and the children to gather up the sticks to make faggots. Their father and mother, seeing them busy at their work, got away from them insensibly and ran away from them all at once along a byway through the winding bushes. When the children saw that they were left alone, they began to cry as loud as they could. Little Thumb let them cry on, knowing very well how to get home again, for as he came he took care to drop all along the way the little white pebbles he had in his pockets. He then said to them, "Be not afraid, brothers. Father and mother have left us here, but I will lead you home again. Only follow me." They did so, and he brought them home by the very same way they came into the forest. They dared not go in, but sat themselves down at the door, listening to what their father and mother were saying. The very moment the faggot maker and his wife reached home, the lord of the manor sent them 10 crowns. That's a lot of money, which he had owed them a long while, and which they never expected. This gave them new life, for the poor people were almost famished. The faggot maker sent his wife immediately to the butcher's. As it was a long while since they had eaten a bit, she bought thrice as much meat as would sup 2 people. When they had eaten, the woman said, "Alas, where are now our poor children? They would make a good feast of what we had left here, but it was you, William, who had a mind to lose them. I told you we should repent of it. What are they doing in the forest? Alas, dear God, the wolves have perhaps already eaten them up. Thou art very inhuman thus to have lost thy children." The faggot maker grew at last quite out of patience, for she repeated it above 20 times, that they should repent of it, and that she was in the right of it for so saying. He threatened to beat her if she did not hold her tongue, rather than own up to his own guilt. It was not that the faggot maker was not perhaps more vexed than his wife, but that she teased him, and that he was of the humour of a great many others who love wives to speak well, but think those very importunate who are continually doing so. She was half drowned in tears, crying out, "Alas, where are now my poor children?" She spoke this so very loud that the children who were at the gate began to cry out all together, "Here we are! Here we are!" She ran immediately to open the door and said, hugging them, "I am glad to see you, my dear children. You are very hungry and weary, and my poor Peter, thou art horribly bemired. Come in and let me clean thee." Now you must know that Peter was her eldest son, whom she loved above all the rest, because he was somewhat carroty, as she herself was. Somewhat carroty. I must remember that if I ever have red hair. I am somewhat carroty. I've never heard it put that way, I'm sure. Yes, PJ does have a cousin who's somewhat carroty, which means I have a niece who is somewhat carroty. But I would never say that to her because I don't think of... Because carrot top was used as an insult when I was at school, so I would never actually use that as a term against someone. But in this context, she loves her eldest son more than the rest because he is somewhat carroty as she is. So there you go. They sat down to supper and ate with such a good appetite as pleased both father and mother, whom they acquainted how frightened they were in the forest, speaking almost always all together. The good folks were extremely glad to see their children once more at home. The good folks, yeah, don't know. If it is something that Dad has done, he is likely capable of doing it again if he is inconvenienced. So we'll just see what happens. Yeah. I don't know. And this joy continued while the 10 crowns lasted. What did I just say? But when the money was all gone, they fell again into their former uneasiness and resolved to lose them again. And that they might be surer of doing it, to carry them to a much greater distance than before. They could not talk of this so secretly, but they were overheard by Little Thumb, who made account to get out of this difficulty as well as the former. But though he got up very early in the morning to go and pick up some little pebbles, he was disappointed, for he found the house door double locked, and was at a stand what to do when their father had given them each of them a piece of bread for their breakfast. Little Thumb fancied he might use this instead of the pebbles, by throwing it in little bits all along the way they should pass, and so he put the bread in his pocket. And we know what happens next. I'm pretty sure it's Hansel and Gretel that this happens to. Their father and mother brought them into the thickest, most obscure part of the forest. Then, when stealing away into a bypath, they there left them. Little Thumb was not very uneasy at it, for he thought he could easily find the way again by means of his bread, which he had scattered all along as he came. But he was very much surprised when he could not find so much as one crumb. The birds had come and eaten it all up. He's not very observant, is he? He should have realised that birds would have. Every bit. They were now in great affliction, for the farther they went, the more they were out of their way, and were more and more bewildered in the forest. Oh, I like that shirt. Thank you. Goody, he's sending me pictures of things like loadable shirts. Night now came on, and there arose a terribly high wind, which made them dreadfully afraid. They fancied they heard on every side of them the howling of wolves coming to eat them up. They scarce dared to speak or turn their heads. After this it rained very hard, which wetted them to the skin. Their feet slipped at every step they took, and they fell into the mire, whence they got up in a very dirty pickle. Their hands were quite benumbed from the cold. Little Thumb climbed up to the top of a tree to see if he could discover anything, and having turned his head about to every side, excuse me, I've got something irritating my eye, which feels like a piece of fluff or an eyelash that's gone astray. We'll carry on. And having turned his head about on every side while he's up the tree, he saw at last a glimmering light like that of a candle, but a long way from the forest. He came down, and when upon the ground he could see it no more, which grieved him sadly. However, having walked for some time with his brothers toward that side on which he had seen the light, he perceived it again as he came out of the wood. So, by having a direction to go, they kept going forwards, and they actually got out of the wood. It's hard to hydrate with the giggles. Yes, it is. It comes out your nose sometimes. I'm going to have a drink of water, by the way. We all need to. He perceived it again as he came out of the wood. They came at last to the house where this candle was, not without an abundance of fear, for very often they lost sight of it, which happened every time they came into a bottom. Now, a bottom is a little valley, a little dip, not a big one, but just a little one. There were places when we lived in England where the road that went through one of those dips was called whatever it is, bottom. That would be the name of the road because it went through that dip. So they're using quite old English here. Which happened every time they came into a bottom. They knocked at the door, and a good woman came and opened it. She asked them what they would have. I'm just imagining our commutation reading this story and having the giggles and being totally broken by it the whole way through. I don't know if there's a version that is quite as modernly inappropriate words as this one. It's hilarious. Anyway, they came at last to the house where this candle was, not without an abundance of fear, for very often they lost sight of it, which happened every time they came into a bottom. They knocked at the door, and a good woman came and opened it, of the house, which had the candle in the window. She asked them what they would have. Can I help you? What they would have, I'm not sure. Little Thumb told her they were poor children who had been lost in the forest and desired to lodge there for God's sake. I'm not sure why a small person who is only 6 years old would say, for God's sake. Need a time bottle because shame isn't accurate, but the age isn't aging well. Yes, it's not aging well, but it does make for some humorous stories. So we'll use shame for now. Thank you for using that, Koriki. That's appropriate. Yes, and I did manage to get it so that shame works when it's in the middle of a sentence. It doesn't have to be at the beginning. The woman, seeing them so very pretty, what we said before about calling people pretty in stories, it does not bode well, began to weep and said to them, "Alas, poor babies, whither are ye come? Do you know that this house belongs to a cruel ogre who eats up little children?" Now we've got Jack and the Bean. We've had Hansel and Gretel with the trail of stones and then the trail of crumbs and losing the children in the woods. Now we've got Jack and the Beanstalk with an ogre's house and an ogre's wife, and the ogre eats children. So I wonder which story he's actually done this version from, because he didn't actually create new stories. He just retold existing stories. So I don't know where this one's from. "Ah, dear madam," answered Little Thumb, who trembled every joint of him as well as his brothers, "what shall we do? To be sure the wolves of the forest will devour us tonight if you refuse us to lie here, and so we would rather the gentleman should eat us, and perhaps he may take pity on us, especially if you please to beg it of him." Okay. The ogre's wife, who believed she could conceal them from her husband till morning, let them come in and brought them to warm themselves at a very good fire, for there was a whole sheep upon the spit, roasting for the ogre's supper. As they began to be a little warm, they heard 3 or 4 great raps at the door. This was the ogre who had come home. Don't you just open the door yourself if it's your home? I think the modern thing of locking the door as soon as you get in the house didn't exist back then. Why is he knocking on his own door? What was that? Maybe he's got his hands full. Then how's he knocking on the door? Anyway, so this has always confused me. There are a few old stories where the ogre, the giant, the whoever comes home and knocks on the door to come into his own home. Upon this, she hid them under the bed and went to open the door. Does PJ want a loadable shirt? I don't know. I'll have to show it to him. But he hasn't got the context yet because he's only just come out to be able to get himself some lunch. I'll have to tell him afterwards, once we've clipped it. Or was that not what we were clipping? I can't remember. And upon this, she hid them under the bed and went to open the door. The ogre presently asked if supper was ready and the wine drawn, and then sat himself down to table. The sheep was as yet all raw and bloody, but he liked it the better for that. So why is she even bothering roasting it over the fire? He sniffed about to the right and left, saying, "I smell fresh meat. Yes, it's your sheep, which is raw and bloody."
The one that's right in front of you.
Yes. "What you smell so," said his wife, "must be the calf which I have just now killed and flayed." That means removing the skin. "I smell fresh meat, I tell thee once more," replied the ogre, looking crossly at his wife, "and there is something here which I do not understand." Now, I think he means not slaughtered yet when he says fresh meat. Something that's potential food. And once again, these are retellings for children. Yeah, not these days, they wouldn't be. As he spoke, and there is something here which I do not understand. Right, I'm just going back to that. As he spoke these words, he got up from the table and went directly to the bed. She'd hidden them under the bed. Ah, said he, "I see then how thou wouldst cheat me, thou cursed woman. I know not why I do not eat thee up too, but it is well for thee that thou art a tough old carrion." Well, there's not a lot of meat on her. "But it is well for thee that thou art a tough old carrion. Here is good game, which comes very quickly to entertain 3 ogres of my acquaintance, who are to pay me a visit in a day or 2. With that he dragged them out from under the bed one by one. The poor children fell upon their knees and begged his pardon, but they had to do with one of the most cruel ogres in the world, who, far from having any pity on them, had already devoured them with his eyes, and told his wife that they would be delicate eating when tossed up with a good savoury sauce. He then took a great knife, and coming up to these poor children, whetted it upon a great whetstone, which he held in his left hand. So he's right-handed, and that's important. Whetstone, that's a stone that has a slightly rough surface, and you draw the blade across it, and it helps to actually sharpen it, keep it sharp, a knife blade. He had already taken hold of one of them when his wife said to him, "Why need you do it now? Is it not time enough tomorrow?" "Hold your prating," said the ogre, or prating. "They will eat the tenderer." "But you have so much meat already," replied his wife. "You have no occasion. Here are a calf, 2 sheep, and half a hog." "That is true," said the ogre. "Give them their belly full, that they may not fall away," get skinny overnight, "and put them to bed." The good woman was overjoyed at this, and gave them a good supper, but they were so much afraid they could not eat it a bit. As for the ogre, he sat down to drink, being highly pleased that he had got wherewithal to treat his friends. He drank a dozen glasses more than ordinary. Okay. Which got up into his head and obliged him to go to bed. He drank too much and got drunk and passed out. No, he drank a dozen glasses more than ordinary, which got up into his head and obliged him to go to bed. Please take notes so that you can use the phrase for yourself if you need to. I think it's wonderful. The ogre had 7 daughters, all little children, and these young... I do not even want to think about how this came about. And these young ogresses had all of them very fine complexions, because they used to eat fresh meat like their father. See, in the old days, they believed that meat kept you healthy instead of saying that it was dangerous. But they had little grey eyes, quite round, hooked noses, and very long, sharp teeth. Who are they taking after? It says but. Is that what ogres look like? Female ogres? Standing at a good distance, and very long, sharp teeth, standing at a good distance from... Oh, the teeth are widely set. I thought the daughters were standing at a good distance from each other. They were not as yet over and above mischievous, but they promised very fair for it, for they had already bitten little children that they might suck their blood. And you thought it was vampires. No, it's ogres' daughters, being not quite so mischievous yet. They had been put to bed early, with every one a gold crown upon her head. There was in the same chamber a bed of the like bigness. The like bigness, yes. The same size. And it was into this bed the ogre's wife put the 7 little boys, after which she went to bed to her husband. Little Thumb, who had observed that the ogre's daughters had crowns of gold upon their heads, was afraid lest the ogre should repent his not killing them, got up about midnight, little Thumb did, got up about midnight, and taking his brother's bonnets and his own, that's their hats, went very softly and put them upon the heads of the 7 little ogresses, after having taken off their crowns of gold, which he put upon his own head and his brother's, that the ogre might take them for his daughters, and his daughters for the little boys whom he wanted to kill. This I've heard before. All this succeeded according to his desire, for the ogre, waking about midnight, and sorry that he deferred to do that till morning, which he might have done overnight, threw himself hastily out of bed, and taking his great knife, "Let us see," said he, "how our little rogues do, and not make 2 jobs of the matter." He then went up, groping all the way into his daughter's chamber, so he didn't take a light with him, and coming to the bed where the little boys lay, and who were every soul of them fast asleep, except little Thumb, who was terribly afraid when he found the ogre fumbling about his head, as he had done about his brothers, the ogre, feeling the golden crowns, said, "I should have made a fine piece of work of it, truly. I find I drank too much last night." Then he went to the bed where the little girls lay, and having found the boys' little bonnets, "Ah," said he, "my merry lads, are you there? Let us work as we ought." And saying these words, without more ado, he cut the throats of all his 7 daughters. Yes, indeed. Jonathan, you missed some fine vintage phrasing to do with drunkenness and also some other things too. And some very old English words for things that these days we think are rude, but also hilarious. PJ just said bottom. Oh, we have a Fluffy who's looking a little bit about things. Hugs. Oh, I shall watch the VOD. Oh, good. Yes, yes. It's hilarious, some of it. And also I go into a lengthy explanation of the technical measurement term of a faggot.
I thought faggots were a type of food.
They are also, but the type of food that is called a faggot is named after the measurement of a bundle of sticks, which is a faggot. It's It's an official measurement that was declared in 1470 something.
Now that actually makes sense.
Yes.
Although why it gets used for
an inappropriate term,
I do not see the connection.
Me neither. Also butts. That's the size of a barrel. Yes. And bottom. The boys were terrified because when they were walking out of the forest to get to the house with the candle, it kept disappearing every time they walked down into a bottom. And I then explained that there were Wallop. Yeah, I then explained that there were street names that were something or other bottom when we were in England because they were these little dips in amongst the hills.
Over Wallop, Middle Wallop, and Nether Wallop.
Yes, name of 3 villages in England. They have some wonderful place names.
Yep.
There's one which I pronounce Wyrepiddle. I don't know how it's meant to be said, but that's the way it's written. It's a village or a town name. Wyre, W-Y-R-E, by the way. But I don't know what it's meant to be said like. I've never found anybody who would actually tell me how it's pronounced correctly, but I'm pretty sure that that's not the way it's said, although it looks like that. Well, Bryson has a few books about things like that. I know. I remember reading...
completely unrelated. The Cat is on the Seat.
If anyone wants to give him treats or turn the camera on. Yes, thank you. Thank you for calming him down. So, yes, I do remember thoroughly enjoying the Bill Bryson book where he's in England. And it was absolutely hilarious. Thank you. Yes, he is hilarious. Love his writing, indeed. I've read a number of his books which were on subjects which I otherwise wouldn't bother with just because it was him writing. Notes from a Small Island. Yes, that's the one. I think that was the very first one of his I read. And I hadn't lived in England at that stage. I had some books on derpy Japanese in Japan written by other Japanese. Oh, wonderful. I love it when there's that sort of thing around. Anyway, we better get on with this story. But yeah, do watch the VOD. I hope you have lots of fun watching it. Jonathan, it's hilarious. Oh my goodness. So, and saying these words, without more ado, he cut the throats of his 7 daughters because he thought they were the boys because they were wearing the boys' bonnets. Well pleased with what he had done, he went to bed again to his wife. And so soon as Little Thumb heard the ogre snore, he waked his brothers and bade them all put on their clothes presently and follow him. They stole down softly into the garden and got over the wall. They kept running about all night and trembled all the while without knowing which way they went. The ogre, when he awoke, said to his wife, "Go upstairs and dress those young rascals who came here last night." The wife was very much surprised at this goodness of her husband, not dreaming after what manner she should dress them. He was meaning get them ready to cook, that sort of dressing, not put their clothes on them, because they are young people who can't dress themselves. But thinking that he had ordered her to go and put on their clothes, she went up and was strangely astonished when she perceived her 7 daughters killed and weltering in their blood. She fainted away, for this is the first expedient amongst all almost all women find in such cases. I think most people would faint away in such cases, women or not, if you inexplicably come upon 7 young people lying dead, weltering in their blood. It would overwhelm you, especially if they happen to be related to you. It's most likely to happen, unless you've watched lots and lots of thrillers where there's that sort of thing happen, in which case, no. And by the way, you've lost your opportunity with the cat. He's gone. The ogre, fearing that his wife would be too long in doing what he ordered, went up himself to help her. He was no less amazed than his wife at this frightful spectacle. "Oh, what have I done?" cried he. "The wretches shall pay for it, and that instantly." Like the boys had done it? Jonathan says 2 pages on the importance of public transit and using it, and ends with, "And besides, the wife wouldn't let me use the car." Which is why he knew all about public transport. Yeah, she probably didn't trust him to drive on the left-hand side of the road correctly. Oh, yeah. "Ah, what have I done?" cried he. "The wretches shall pay for it, and that instantly." He threw a pitcher of water upon his wife's face, and having brought her to herself, said, "Give me quickly my boots of 7 leagues." There was somebody else had 7-league boots. This is feeling like a very mixed up story. "That I may go and catch them." He went out, and having run over a vast deal of ground, both on this side and that, sides of something, I don't know what, he came at last into the very road where the poor children were, and not above 100 paces from their father's house. Hey, those boots exist in D&D. Yes, they do, but I have not played D&D. I have read lots of fairy tales in my growing up, and 7-league boots are actually a feature in something, and I don't know why it was 7 leagues. A league is a particular measure of distance way beyond a normal step length. You can look that one up. It came at last into the very road where the poor children were, and not above 100 paces from their father's house. So they actually managed to find their way home. They espied the ogre, who went at one step from mountain to mountain and over rivers as easily as the narrowest kennels. I think this is a different sort. 7-league boots are only good for cooks. Oh my goodness. They espied the ogre, who went at one step from mountain to mountain and over rivers as easily as the narrowest kennels. I don't know what that means. Little Thumb, seeing a hollow rock near the place where they were, made his brothers hide themselves in it and crowded into it himself, minding always what would become of the ogre. So keeping in mind and watching and thinking about it, I guess. The ogre, who found himself much tired with his long and fruitless journey, for these boots of 7 leagues greatly fatigued the wearer, because, yes, you are still travelling those huge distances. It's just the boots help you to take the bigger steps. Doesn't reduce the energy usage. I like this. Had a great mind to rest himself, and by chance went to sit down upon the rock where the little boys had hid themselves. As it was impossible he could be more weary than he was, he fell asleep, and after reposing himself some time, began to snore so frightfully that the poor children were no less afraid of him than when he held up his great knife and was going to cut their throats. Little Thumb was not so much frightened as his brothers, and told them that they should run away immediately toward home while the ogre was asleep so soundly, and that they should not be in any pain about him. They took himself. They took his advice and got home presently. Little Thumb, so he didn't go with them. Little Thumb came up to the ogre, pulled off his boots gently, and put them on his own legs. So the boots resized to fit whoever was wearing them, I guess. These boots were very long and large, but as they were fairies, they had the gift of becoming big and little according to the legs of those who wore them. Fairies, as in had been from fairies. Not the boots themselves are fairies. So that they fitted his feet and legs, as well as if they had been made on purpose for him. He went immediately to the ogre's house, where he saw his wife crying bitterly for the loss of the ogre's murdered daughters. "Your husband," said Little Thumb, "is in very great danger of being taken by a gang of thieves who have sworn to kill him if he does not give them all his gold and silver." The very moment they held their daggers at his throat, he perceived me and desired me to come and tell you the condition he is in, and that you should give me whatsoever he has of value, without retaining any one thing, for otherwise they will kill him without mercy. And as his case is very pressing, he desired me to make use, you see I have them on, of his boots, that I might make the more haste, and to show you that I do not impose upon you. The good woman, being sadly frightened, gave him all she had, for this ogre was a very good husband, though he used to eat up little children. Yes, I have a very good husband, aside from the fact that he eats children. Not a very nice recommendation, really. Little Thumb, having thus got all the ogre's money, came home to his father's house, where he was received with abundance of joy. There are many people who do not agree in this circumstance, and pretend that Little Thumb never robbed the ogre at all, and that he only thought he might very justly and with a safe conscience take off his boots of 7 leagues, because he had made no other use of them but to run after little children. These folks affirm that they are very well assured of this, and the more as having drunk and eaten often at the faggot maker's house. They aver that when Little Thumb had taken off the ogre's boots, he went to court, where he was informed that they were very much in pain about a certain army which was 200 leagues off, banging the microphone, and the success of a battle. He went, say they, to the king, and told him that, if he desired it, he would bring him news from the army before night. The king promised him a great sum of money upon that condition. Little Thumb was as good as his word, and returned that very same night with the news, and this first expedition causing him to be known, he got whatever he pleased, for the king paid him very well for carrying his orders to the army. After having for some time carried on the business of a messenger, and gained thereby great wealth, he went home to his father, where it was impossible to express the joy they were all in at his return. He made the whole family very easy, bought places for his father and brothers, and by that means settled them very handsomely in the world, and in the meantime made his court to perfection. And we don't know what happened to the ogre. He was sleeping, and he was sleeping sound enough to be snoring heavily, and his wife gave away all their wealth. The end of the ogre? Why would that stop him being vengeful? Why would that stop him seeking out small children to eat? And what happened to his friends who were coming as guests? Maybe his friends who were coming as guests, having been told they were going to get yummy children to eat, were so incensed at his failure to do so, they beat him up and got rid of him. I don't know. It's very, very weird. Very weird. So there you go. And that's the end of Little Thumb. Not the story I'm familiar with. And that version, is based on the Charles Perrault story. Just for something different. Now we're on to the 40 Thieves. Isn't that Ali Baba? Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves? In a town in Persia, that's what it used to be called, and then it became called Iran, and then it was called Persia again, and then it was called Iran again, and at some stage during its history, it was a very, very well-educated country, and the women were able to get doctorates at university, and they were amongst some of the most highly educated women in the Western world, as well as in Iran. There were women who had actually done their degrees at university in Persia and moved to other countries and worked over there just as part of their being themselves life. They travelled and worked and settled down in other countries, and they were actually in the top of their fields in other countries that they went to. And now it's a dictatorship, basically, a religious dictatorship. And women can't be seen because they're corrupting the men. Yes, very dangerous are women, very dangerous. I don't know, people have screwy ideas about some things. So Persia is one of the names for the country that is now Iran. But it has a very long history and very complicated. And I am going to have a drink of water. So are you. Right, here we go. The 40 Thieves. In a town in Persia, there dwelt two brothers, one named Qasim, the other Ali Baba. There you go, B-A-B-A. Qasim was married to a rich wife and lived in plenty, while Ali Baba had to maintain his wife and children by cutting wood in a neighbouring forest and selling it in the town. Oh, we have another faggot maker. One day when Ali Baba was in the forest, he saw a troop of men on horseback coming toward him in a cloud of dust. He was afraid they were robbers and climbed into a tree for safety. When they came up to him and dismounted, he counted 40 of them. They unbridled their horses. Hi, Jiltair, great to have you back again. Yes, the 40 Thieves. Yes, we've just had Little Thumb, whose parents were faggot makers. And the ogre disappeared from the end of the story after Little Thumb had stolen his 7-leg boots. We don't know what happened to the ogre, and it's very mysterious. But there you go. It's hilarious, actually. Some of the modern, our modern reactions to some of the things that are part of the story. Well, mine principally, because I'm the one that you see. Right, we'll carry on with the 40 Thieves. They unbridled their horses and tied them to trees. The finest man among them, whom Ali Baba took to be their captain, went a little way among some bushes and said, "Open sesame!" so plainly that Ali Baba heard him. Now, there's a footnote here, so I need to go and find the footnote. I'm hoping... yeah, we have it at the end of the paragraph. Sesame is a type of grain. In fact, I've got a little pot of sesame seeds. They're often used in Far Eastern cooking. I was going to say Asian, but Persia. Europe used to call where Persia is Asia, that whole general region. So it's Far Eastern Asia. Well, Asia to me, I live in New Zealand. Asia is that part of the northwestern Pacific, the countries that border on there. That's Asia to me, apart from Russia, because Russia comes all the way across from the other side. So let's carry on. So it's a grain. That's the footnote. It's a seed. And it's used in sesame oil and deep roasted sesame dressing, which is very yummy. So plainly that... said open sesame so plainly that Ali Baba heard him. A door opened in the rocks. And having made the troop go in, he followed them. And the door shut again of itself. So the horses are staying outside and they're inside. They stayed some time inside, and Ali Baba, fearing they might come out and catch him, was forced to sit patiently in the tree. At last the door opened again, and the 40 Thieves came out. As the captain went in last, he came out first, and made them all pass by him. He then he's probably checking that they haven't pinched anything. He then closed the door, saying, "Shut, sesame." Says me? Maybe. Every man bridled his horse and mounted. The captain put himself at their head, and they returned as they came. Then Ali Baba climbed down and went to the door concealed among the bushes and said, "Open sesame," and it flew open. So it's obviously not actually detecting whose voice. That's good. Ali Baba, who expected a dull, dismal place, it's a cave inside the rocks, was not at all surprised by the door opening, but expecting a dull cave inside, was greatly surprised to find it large and well lighted, hollowed by the hand of man in the form of a vault, which received the light from an opening in the ceiling. He saw rich bales of merchandise, silk, stuff brocades. I don't know what stuff brocades are as opposed to brocades. all piled together, and gold and silver in heaps, and money in leather purses. He went in, and the door shut behind him. When you're outside, you have to tell it to shut, but when you're inside, you don't. This is puzzling. My logical brain's confused. He did not look at the silver, but brought out as many bags of gold as he thought his asses, which were browsing outside, could carry, loaded them with the bags and hid it all with faggots. Oh, so he came out and he did that. Using the words "shut sesame," he closed the door and went home. So at this stage, he hasn't forgotten the key words. He then drove his asses into the yard. By the way, an ass in the old days is what we now call a donkey. Donkey is actually a more modern term for an ass. Cleopatra was alleged to have bathed in ass's milk, in the milk of the donkeys. Horse's milk is used in other countries for all sorts of things. So it seems weird to us, but not to other people who live that way. I don't know. Then he drove his asses into the yard, shut the gates, carried the money bags to his wife because he'd gone home, remember, and emptied them out before her. He bade her keep the secret, and he would go and bury the gold. "Let me first measure it," said his wife. "I will go borrow a measure of someone while you dig the hole." Oh dear. So she ran to the wife of Cassim and borrowed a measure. Knowing Ali Baba's poverty, the sister was curious to find out what sort of grain his wife wished to measure. So she's living a life of luxury. She knows her sister-in-law is very poor, and so she has to know what her sister-in-law has the audacity to have enough of, to need measuring. Check your privilege, girl. And artfully put some suet at the bottom of the measure. Suet is a type of animal fat that usually needs chopping up into pieces so it can be rendered and used. Ali Baba's wife went home and set the measure on the heap of gold and filled it and emptied it often to her great content. She then carried it back to her sister without noticing that a piece of gold was sticking. How do you not notice a piece of gold stuck in the bottom of the container? Maybe it's very fancy and ornate. Maybe it's got a closed neck on it. I don't know, but this is always confused. I'm sorry. She then carried it back to her sister without noticing that a piece of gold was sticking to it, which Cassim's wife perceived directly her back was turned. She grew very curious and said to Cassim when he came home, "Cassim, your brother is richer than you." "By finding one gold piece. He's richer than you." "I wouldn't want to be married to this woman. Who have you been out with?" Because he comes home 5 minutes late. She's jumping to huge conclusions. Anyway, she might be right, but she's still jumping to conclusions. Let's carry on. "Cassim, your brother is richer than you. He does not count his money. He measures it." No, his wife does. He begged her. She may not be able to count that high. He begged her to explain this riddle, which she did by showing him the piece of money and telling him where she found it. Then Cassim grew so envious that he could not sleep and went to his brother. He was already rich, and he didn't care that his brother was poor. Yeah, modern attitudes are definitely showing through today. Sorry about that, folks, but let's carry on. He grew so envious that he could not sleep and went to his brother in the morning before sunrise. "Ali Baba," he said, showing him the gold piece, "you pretend to be poor and yet you measure gold." By this, Ali Baba perceived that through his wife's folly, Cassim and his wife knew their secret, so he confessed all and offered Cassim a share. "The guy's richer than you. Why do you need to give him any? He never helped you." "That I expect," said Cassim. "But I must know where to find the treasure, otherwise I will discover all and you will lose all." Ali Baba, more out of kindness than fear, told him of the cave and the very words to use. Cassim left Ali Baba, meaning to be beforehand with him. Get there first. and get the treasure for himself. He rose early next morning and set out with 10 mules loaded with great chests. He soon found the place and the door in the rock. He said, "Open, Sesame," and the door opened and shut behind him. He could have feasted his eyes all day on the treasures, but he now hastened to gather together as much of it as possible. But when he was ready to go, he could not remember what to say for thinking of his great riches. Instead of Sesame, he said, "Open, barley," and the door remained fast. He named several different sorts of grain, all but the right one, and the door still stuck fast. He was so frightened at the danger he was in that he had as much forgotten the word as if he had never heard it. About noon, the robbers returned to their cave and saw Cassim's mules roving about with great chests on their backs. This gave them the alarm. They drew their sabres and went to the door, which opened on their captains, saying, "Open, Sesame." Cassim, who had heard the trampling of their horses' feet, resolved to sell his life dearly, so that when the door opened he leapt out and threw the captain down. In vain, however, for the robbers with their sabres soon killed him. On entering the cave they saw all the bags laid ready and could not imagine how anyone had got in without knowing their secret. They cut Cassim's body into 4 quarters and nailed them up inside the cave in order to frighten anyone who should venture in, and went away in search of more treasure. As night drew on, Cassim's wife grew very uneasy and ran to her brother-in-law and told him where her husband had gone. "It's your fault, lady. You didn't need to blab. You didn't need to be nosy." It's partly her fault. Ali Baba did his best to comfort her and set out to the forest in search of Cassim. The first thing he saw on entering the cave was his dead brother. Full of horror, he put the body on one of his on one of his asses and bags of gold on the other 2. So he's only got 3 asses. His brother took 10 asses with him. We don't know how many more he had, but he only took 10 with him with chests. And covering all with some faggots, returned home. He drove the 2 asses laden with gold into his own yard and led the other to Cassim's house. The door was opened by the slave Morgiana, whom he knew to be both brave and cunning. Unloading the ass, he said to her, "This is the body of your master who has been murdered, but whom we must bury as though he had died in his bed. I will speak with you again, but now tell your mistress I am come." Morgiana might be on his side. The wife of Cassim, on learning the fate of her husband, broke out into cries and tears, but Ali Baba offered to take her to live with him and his wife if she would promise to keep his counsel and leave everything to Morgiana. Whereupon she agreed and dried her eyes. Morgiana, meanwhile, sought an apothecary and asked him for some lozenges. "My poor master," she said, "can neither eat nor speak, and no one knows what his distemper is." She carried home the lozenges and returned next day weeping, and asked for an essence only given to those just about to die. Thus in the evening no one was surprised to hear the wretched shrieks and cries of Cassim's wife, and Morgiana telling everyone that Cassim was dead. The day after, so she's actually faked that he has died, even though he's already dead. And thus in the evening no one was surprised to hear the wretched shrieks and cries of Cassim's wife, and Morgiana telling everyone that Cassim was dead. The day after, Morgiana went to an old cobbler near the gates of the town, who opened his stall early, put a piece of gold in his hand, and bade him follow her with his needle and thread. Yuck. Having bound his eyes with a handkerchief, she took him to the room where the body lay, pulled off the bandage and bade him sew the quarters together, after which she covered his eyes again and led him home. Then they buried Cassim, and Morgiana, his slave, followed him to the grave, weeping and tearing her hair, while Cassim's wife stayed at home, uttering lamentable cries. Next day she went to live with Ali Baba, who gave Cassim's shop to his eldest son. The 40 thieves, on their return to the cave, were much astonished to find Cassim's body gone, and some of their money bags. "We are certainly discovered," said the captain, "and shall be undone if we cannot find out who it is that knows our secret. 2 men must have known it. We have killed one, we must now find the other. To this end, one of you who is bold and artful must go into the city dressed as a traveller and discover whom we have killed and whether men talk of the strange manner of his death. If the messenger fails, he must lose his life, naturally, lest we be betrayed. One of the thieves started up and offered to do this, and after the rest had highly commended him for his bravery, he disguised himself and happened to enter the town at daybreak, just by Baba Mustapha's stall. The thief bade him good day, saying, "Honest man, how can you possibly see to stitch at your age?" "Old as I am," replied the cobbler, "I have very good eyes, and will you believe me when I tell you that I sewed a dead body together in a place where I have less light than I have now?" The robber was overjoyed at his good fortune, and giving him a piece of gold, desired to be shown the house where he had stitched up the dead body. At first Mustapha refused, saying he had been blindfolded, but when the robber gave him another piece of gold, he began to think he might remember the turnings if blindfolded as before. This means succeeded. The robber partly led him and was partly guided by him right in front of Cassim's house, the door of which the robber marked with a piece of chalk. Then, well pleased, he bade farewell to Baba Mustapha and returned to the forest. By and by, Morgiana, going out, saw the mark the robber had made, quickly guessed that some mischief was brewing, and fetching a piece of chalk, marked 2 or 3 doors on each side without saying anything to her master or mistress. The thief meantime told his comrades of his discovery. The captain thanked him and bade him show him the house he had marked. But when they came to it, they saw that 5 or 6 of the houses were chalked in the same manner. The guide was so confounded that he knew not what answer to make, and when they returned he was at once beheaded for having failed, because he was told that that would happen. Another robber was dispatched, and having won over Baba Mustapha, marked the house in red chalk, but Morgiana being again too clever for them, the second messenger was put to death also. The captain now resolved to go himself, but wiser than the others, he did not mark the house, but looked at it so closely that he could not fail to remember it. He returned and ordered his men to go into the neighbouring villages and buy 19 mules, that's a cross between a donkey and a horse, and 38 leather jars, all empty except one which was full of oil. The captain put one of his men fully armed into each, rubbing the outside of the jars with oil from the full vessel, because a clay jar that carries oil is going to have a little bit of seepage through the clay so that it has a glisten, a gleam from the oil that's in it. So this is to make sure that they all look the same, I think. That's what it would appear to be. Rubbing the outside of the jars with oil from the full vessel. Then the 19 mules were loaded with 37 robbers in jars and the jar of oil, and reached the town by dusk. The captain stopped his mules in front of Ali Baba's house. But it wasn't Ali Baba's house, it was meant to be Cassim's house, and said to Ali Baba, who was sitting outside for coolness, "I have brought some oil from a distance to sell at tomorrow's market, but it is now so late that I know not where to pass the night unless you will do me the favour to take me in." Though Ali Baba had seen the captain of the robbers in the forest, he did not recognize him in the disguise of an oil merchant. He bade him welcome, opened his gates for the mules to enter, and went to Morgiana to bid her prepare a bed and supper for his guest. He brought the stranger into his hall, and after they had supped, went again to speak to Morgiana in the kitchen, while the captain went into the yard under the pretence of seeing after his mules, but really to tell his men what to do. Beginning at the first jar and ending at the last, he said to each man, "As soon as I throw some stones from the window of the chamber where I lie, cut the jars open with your knives and come out." So they're not fired clay, they're just sun-baked clay. "And I will be with you in a trice." He returned to the house, and Morgiana led him to his chamber. She then told Abdallah, her fellow slave, to set on the pot to make some broth for her master, who had gone to bed. Meanwhile, her lamp went out, and she had no more oil in the house. "Do not be uneasy," said Abdallah. "Go into the yard and take some from one of those jars." Morgiana thanked him for his advice, took the oil pot, and went into the yard. When she came to the first jar, the robber inside said softly, Is it time? Any other slave but Morgiana, on finding a man in the jar instead of the oil she wanted, would have screamed and made a noise, but she, knowing the danger her master was in, bethought herself of a plan and answered quietly, "Not yet, but presently." She went to all the jars, giving the same answer till she came to the jar of oil. She now saw that her master, thinking to entertain an oil merchant, had let 38 robbers into his house. She filled her oil pot, went back to the kitchen, and having lit her lamp, went again to the oil jar and filled a large kettle full of oil. When it boiled, she went and poured enough oil into every jar to stifle and kill the robber inside. When this brave deed was done, she went back to the kitchen, put out the fire and the lamp, and waited to see what would happen. In a quarter of an hour, the captain of the robbers awoke, got up and opened the window. As all seemed quiet, he threw down some little pebbles which hit the jars. He listened, and as none of his men seemed to stir, grew uneasy, and went down into the yard. On going to the first jar and saying, "Are you asleep?" he smelt the hot boiled oil, and knew at once that his plot to murder Ali Baba and his household had been discovered. He found all the gang was dead, and missing the oil out of the last jar, became aware of the manner of their death. He then forced the lock of a door leading into a garden, and climbing over several walls, made his escape. Morgiana heard and saw all this, and rejoicing at her success, went to bed and fell asleep. At daybreak, Ali Baba arose, and seeing the oil jars still there, asked why the merchant had not gone with his mules. Morgiana bade him look in the first jar and see if there was any oil. Seeing a man, he started back in terror. "Have no fear," said Morgiana. "The man cannot harm you. He's dead." Ali Baba, when he had recovered somewhat from his astonishment, asked what had become of the merchant. "Merchant," said she, "he's no more a merchant than I am." And she told him the whole story, assuring him that it was a plot of the robbers of the forest, of whom only 3 were left, and that the white and red chalk marks had something to do with it. Ali Baba at once gave Morgiana her freedom, saying that he owed her his life. They then buried the bodies in Ali Baba's garden, while the mules were sold in the market by his slaves. The captain returned to his lonely cave, which seemed frightful to him without his lost companions, because remember he'd lost some from having gone into town and marked the doors and then coming back. So it's not just the ones that were in the jars. The captain returned to his lonely cave, which seemed frightful to him without his lost companions, and firmly resolved to avenge them by killing Ali Baba. He dressed himself carefully and went into town, where he took lodgings in an inn. In the course of a great many journeys to the forest, he carried away many rich stuffs and much fine linen, and set up a shop opposite that of Ali Baba's son. He called himself Cogia Hassan, and as he was both civil and well-dressed, he soon made friends with Ali Baba's son, and through him with Ali Baba, whom he was continually asking to sup with him. Ali Baba, wishing to return his kindness, invited him into his house and received him smiling, thanking him for his kindness to his son. When the merchant was about to take his leave, Ali Baba stopped him, saying, "Where are you going, sir, in such haste? Will you not stay and sup with me?" The merchant refused, saying that he had a reason, and on Ali Baba's asking what it was, he replied, "It is, sir, that I can eat no victuals that have any salt in them." "If that is all," said Ali Baba, "let me tell you there shall be no salt in either the meat or the bread that we eat tonight." He went to give this order to Morgiana, who was much surprised. "Who is this man," she said, "who eats no salt with his meat?" "He is an honest man, Morgiana," returned her master, therefore do as I bid you." But she could not withstand a desire to see this strange man, so she helped Abdallah to carry up the dishes. Ali Baba isn't very perceptive, meeting the same person 3 times and not recognizing him still, says Joltaire. Exactly. Just as well he has Morgiana in his house. Just as well she still works there, even though he's given her her freedom. She was a slave, now she's a servant, I guess. But she could not withstand a desire to see this strange man, so she helped Abdallah to carry up the dishes, and saw in a moment that Cogia Hassan was the robber captain and carried a dagger under his garment. "I'm not surprised," she said to herself, "that this wicked man who intends to kill my master will eat no salt with him, but I will hinder his plans." Eating someone's salt in their house was a sign of peace and friendship. But I will hinder his plans. She sent up the supper by Abdallah, while she made ready for one of the boldest acts that could be thought on. When the dessert had been served, Cogia Hassan was left alone with Ali Baba and his son, whom he thought to make drunk and then to murder them. Morgiana meanwhile put on a headdress like a dancing girl's, and clasped a girdle around her waist, from which hung a dagger with a silver hilt, and said to Abdallah, "Take your tabor," that's an instrument, "and let us go and divert our master and his guest." Abdallah took his tabor and played before Morgiana until they came to the door, where Abdallah stopped playing, and Morgiana made a low curtsy. "Come in, Morgiana," said Ali Baba, "and let Cogia Hassan see what you can do." And turning to Cogia Hassan, he said, "She is my slave and my housekeeper." Actually, she's not a slave anymore because you've already given her freedom. Cogia Hassan was by no means pleased, for he feared that his chance of killing Ali Baba was gone for the present, but he pretended great eagerness to see Morgiana, and Abdallah began to play, and Morgiana to dance. After she had performed several dances, she drew her dagger and made passes with it, sometimes pointing it at her own breast, sometimes at her master's, as if it were part of the dance. Suddenly, out of breath, she snatched the tabor from Abdallah with her left hand, and holding the dagger in her right hand, held out the tabor to her master. Abdallah and his son put a piece of gold into it, and Cogia Hassan, seeing that she was coming to him, pulled out his purse to make her a present. But while he was putting his hand into it, Morgiana plunged the dagger into his heart. "Unhappy girl!" cried Ali Baba and his son. "What have you done to ruin us?" "Unhappy girl, your housekeeper has just killed your guest. And you say, 'Unhappy girl.' I don't think Ali Baba is the brightest knife in the box." Seriously. "Unhappy girl," cried Ali Baba and his son, "what have you done to ruin us?" "It was to preserve you, master, not to ruin you," answered Morgiana. Maybe it happens with all his guests. "It was to preserve you, master, not to ruin you," answered Morgiana. "See here," opening the false merchant's garment and showing the dagger. "See what an enemy you have entertained." You should see how bad my mum is for that. Drink up your water, folks, and do let me know in the chat that you have done so. Come on, we're holding each other accountable. "See what an enemy you have entertained. Remember, he would eat no salt with you, and what more would you have?" It would be an indication that you don't eat someone's salt. It should have been a big tell. "Look at him. He is both the false oil merchant and the captain of the 40 thieves." Ali Baba was so grateful to Morgiana for thus saving his life that he offered her to his son in marriage, who readily consented, and a few days after the wedding was celebrated with greatest splendour. At the end of a year, Ali Baba, hearing nothing of the 2 remaining robbers, judged they were dead and set out to open the cave. The door opened on his saying, "Open sesame." He went in and saw that nobody had been there since the captain left it. He brought away as much gold as he could carry and returned to town. He told his son the secret of the cave, which his son handed down in his turn, so the children and grandchildren of Ali Baba were rich to the end of their lives. And that is from the Arabian Nights. There you go. Oh my goodness. And the last one is the last one for today and for this current series of reading from the Blue Fairy book. that we have been doing is Hansel and Gretel, and it's written here with 2 T's for Gretel. I've only ever seen it with 1, I think. Right, let's carry on. Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there dwelt on the outskirts of a large... Actually, before I do, I have to cross off the ones I've read, otherwise I'll forget, because I know I will. Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there dwelt on the outskirts of a large forest a poor woodcutter. They put bread into their loadable shirts for the hike into the forest. Exactly. A poor woodcutter with his wife. Yeah, I can see how you go from a poor woodcutter to faggot makers. It's the same thing. Except that they've got less children. A poor woodcutter with his wife and 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. He had always little enough to live on, and once when there was a great famine in the land, he couldn't even provide them with daily bread. One night, as he was tossing about in bed, full of cares and worry, he sighed and said to his wife, "What's to become of us? How are we to support our poor children now that we have nothing more for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman. "Early tomorrow morning we'll take the children out into the thickest part of the wood. There we shall light a fire for them and give them each a piece of bread. Then we'll go on to our work and leave them alone. They won't be able to find their way home, and we shall thus be rid of them." This is their mother, or maybe it's their stepmother. It's a fairy tale, so let's guess that it's the wicked stepmother, as usual. "No, wife," said her husband, "that I won't do. How could I find it in my heart to leave my children alone in the wood? The wild beasts would soon come and tear them to pieces." "Oh, you fool," said she, "then we must all 4 die of hunger, and you may just as well go and plane the boards for our coffins." And she left him no peace till he consented. "But I can't help feeling sorry for the poor children," added her husband. The children, too, had not been able to sleep for hunger, and had heard what their stepmother, there you go, stepmother, had said to their father. Gretel wept bitterly and spoke to Hansel. "Now it's all up to us." "No, no, Gretel," said Hansel, "don't fret yourself. I'll be able to find a way to escape, no fear." And when the old people had fallen asleep, he got up and slipped on his little coat, opened the back door and stole out. The moon was shining clearly, and the white pebbles which lay in front of the house glittered like bits of silver. I've always wondered why in any of these stories the kids don't actually pick up more stones that they need, more pebbles, and store some away in the house so they don't have to get out and discover the house is locked and use their bread and feed the birds with it. And maybe the birds could have led them home or led them somewhere safe instead. I don't know. It's always puzzled me. Hansel bent down and filled his pocket with as many of them as he could cram in. Then he went back and said to Gretel, "Be comforted, my dear little sister, and go to sleep. God will not desert us." And he lay down in bed again. Are you going to say that he deserted you when you didn't get the pebbles next time? At daybreak, even before the sun was up, the woman came and woke the 2 children. "Get up, you lie-a-beds. We're all going to the forest to fetch wood." She gave them each a bit of bread and said, "There's something for your luncheon, but don't eat it up before, for it's all you'll get." Gretel took the bread under her apron as Hansel had the stones in his pocket. Under her apron. Maybe that's a euphemism for storing it in a storage space in your garments. I don't know. It's strange. Maybe that's where their pockets are. Then they all set out together on the way to the forest. After they had walked for a little, Hansel stood still and looked back at the house, and this manoeuvre he repeated again and again. His father observed him and said, "Hansel, what are you gazing at there, and why do you always remain behind? Take care and don't lose your footing." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I'm looking back at my white kitten, which is sitting on the roof, waving me farewell." The woman exclaimed, "What a donkey you are! That isn't your kitten, that's the morning sun shining on the chimney." But Hansel had not looked back at his kitten, but had always dropped one of the white pebbles out of his pocket onto the path. Surely the parents would notice them if they come back by the same path. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now, children, go and fetch a lot of wood, and I'll light a fire that you may not feel cold." Hansel and Gretel heaped up brushwood till they had made a pile nearly the size of a small hill. The brushwood was set fire to, and when the flames leapt high, the woman said, "Now lie down at the fire, children, and rest yourselves. We're going into the forest to cut down wood, and when we've finished we'll come back and fetch you." Hansel and Gretel sat down beside the fire, and at midday ate their little bits of bread. They heard the strokes of the axe, so they thought their father was quite near. But it was no axe they heard, but a bough he had tied on a dead tree that was blown about by the wind. And when they had sat for a long time, their eyes closed with fatigue, and they fell fast asleep. When they awoke at last, it was pitch dark. Gretel began to cry and said, "How are we ever to get out of the wood?" But Hansel comforted her. "Wait a bit," he said, "till the moon is up, and then we'll find our way sure enough." And when the full moon had risen, he took his sister by the hand and followed the pebbles, which shone like new threepenny bits, and showed them the path. They walked on through the night, and at daybreak reached their father's house again. They knocked at the door. Yes, they also could simply pick the pebbles back up when they walked back. Indeed, instead of leaving it obvious to anyone who walks past. Oh, look, there's a strange trail of white pebbles. They stand out from everything else. What are they doing here? I mean, to me, the pebbles are a dead giveaway to the parents. If they're noticeable enough for the children, they should be noticeable to the parents as well. And they knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it, she exclaimed, "You naughty children, what a time you've slept in the wood. We thought you were never going to come back." But the father rejoiced, for his conscience had reproached him for leaving his children behind by themselves. Not long afterward there was again great dearth in the land, in other words, not enough. So that one instance was long enough for the famine to be over. There was great dearth, lack, in the land, and the children heard their mother address their father thus in bed one night. "Everything is eaten up once more. We have only half a loaf in the house, and when that's done, it's all up with us. The children must be got rid of. We'll lead them deeper into the wood this time, so that they won't be able to find their way out again. There is no way of saving ourselves, no other way." Man's heart smote him heavily, and he thought, surely it would be better to share the last bite with one's children. But his wife wouldn't listen to his arguments, and did nothing but scold and reproach him. If a man yields once, he's done for, and so, because he had given in the first time, he was forced to do so the second. But the children were awake and had heard the conversation. When the old people were asleep, Hansel got up and wanted to go out and pick up pebbles again, as he'd done the first time, but the woman had barred the door, and Hansel couldn't get out. But he consoled his little sister and said, "Don't cry, Gretel, and sleep peacefully, for God is sure to help us." At dawn the woman came and made the children get up. They received their bit of bread, but it was even smaller than the time before. On the way to the wood, Hansel crumbled it in his pocket, and every few minutes he stood still and dropped a crumb on the ground. Those would be hard to find compared with white pebbles. "Hansel, what are you stopping and looking about you for?" said his father. "I'm looking back at my little pigeon, which is sitting on the roof waving me a farewell," answered Hansel. "Fool," said their wife, "that isn't your pigeon, it's the morning sun glittering on the chimney." But Hansel gradually threw all his crumbs on the path. The woman led the children still deeper into the forest, further than they had ever been in their lives before. Then a big fire was lit again, and the mother said, "Just sit down there, children, and if you're tired you can sleep a bit. We're going into the forest further to cut down wood, and in the evening, when we're finished, we'll come back to fetch you." At midday Gretel divided her bread with Hansel, for he had strewn his all along their path. Then they fell asleep. And evening passed away, but nobody came to the poor children. They didn't awake till it was pitch dark, and Hansel comforted his sister, saying, Only wait, Gretel, till the moon rises. Then we shall see the breadcrumbs I scattered along the path. They will show us the way back to the house. When the moon appeared, they got up, but they found no crumbs, for the thousands of birds that fly about the woods and fields had picked them all up. Never mind, said Hansel to Gretel. You'll see, we'll find a way out. But all the same they did not. They wandered about the whole night and the next day from morning till evening, but they could not find a path out of the wood. They were very hungry too, for they had nothing to eat but a few berries they found growing on the ground, and at last they were so tired that their legs refused to carry them any longer, so they lay down under a tree and fell asleep. On the third morning after they had left their father's house, they set about their wandering again, but got only deeper and deeper into the wood, and now they felt that if help did not come to them soon, they must perish. At midday, they saw a beautiful little snow-white bird sitting on a branch, which sang so sweetly that they stopped still and listened to it. And when its song was finished, it flapped its wings and flew on in front of them. They followed it and came to a little house, on the roof of which it perched. And when they came quite near, they saw that the cottage was made of bread and roofed with cakes. Is this like an exhaustion dream? Hallucination? And roofed with cakes, while the window was made of transparent sugar. Now we'll set to, said Hansel, and have a regular blowout. I'll eat a bit of the roof, and you, Gretel, can eat some of the window, which you'll find a sweet morsel. Hansel stretched up his hand and broke off a little bit of roof to see what it was like, and Gretel went to the casement and began to nibble at it. Thereupon a shrill voice called out from the room inside, Nibble, nibble, little mouse, who's nibbling my house? The children answered, 'Tis heaven's own child, the tempest wild, and went on eating without putting themselves out. Putting themselves out, I think it meant. Hansel, who thoroughly appreciated the roof, tore down a big bit of it, while Gretel pushed out a whole round window pane and sat down the better to enjoy it. Suddenly the door opened, and an ancient dame, leaning on a staff, hobbled out. Hansel and Gretel were so terrified that they let what they had in their hands fall, but the old woman shook her head and said, Oh, ho, you dear children, who led you here? Just come in and stay with me. No ill shall befall you. If someone's, without your asking, stating that no ill will befall you, you should be skeptical. She took them both by the hand and led them into the house and laid a most sumptuous dinner before them, milk and sugared pancakes with apples and nuts. After they had finished, 2 beautiful little white beds were prepared for them, and when Hansel and Gretel lay down in them, they felt as if they'd got into heaven. So we've got a footnote on one of the phrases used just before. Now we'll set to and have a regular blowout. That means just really going for it. And the footnote says, he was a vulgar boy, because that was not rude, but crude language, using slang like that. And so obviously Andrew Lang felt that it needed to be referenced. I don't know why. He's telling us it's about ogres killing people and blood coming out and all sorts of stuff, and then he has to say that Hansel was a vulgar boy for saying we'll have a regular blowout, as in really gorge ourselves on this. I guess it's okay for the bad guys to do bad guy things, but our main characters, the kids in the story, we need to make exception. The old woman had appeared to be most friendly, but she was really an old witch who had waylaid the children and had only built the little bread house in order to lure them in. When anyone came into her power, she killed, cooked, and ate him. That's called cannibalism, people, and it's not okay. Please refrain. And held a regular feast day for the occasion. Now, witches have red eyes and cannot see far, but like beasts they have a keen sense of smell and know when human beings pass by. Actually, if witches are not humans, then it's not cannibalism, by the way. I didn't know they had red eyes. When Hansel and Gretel fell into her hands, she laughed maliciously and said jeeringly, I've got them now, they shan't escape me. And it's the old spelling of shan't, S-H-A''N''T. Now we only put one apostrophe in. Early in the morning, when the children were awake, she rose up, and when she saw them both... Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she rose up, and when she saw them both sleeping so peacefully with their rosy, round cheeks, she muttered to herself, That'll be a dainty bite. Then she seized Hansel with her bony hand and carried him into a little stable and barred the door on him. He might scream as much as he liked. It did him no good. Then she went to Gretel, shook her till she awoke, and cried, Get up, you lazy bones. Fetch water and cook something for your brother. When he's fat, I'll eat him up. Gretel began to cry bitterly, but it was of no use. She had to do what the wicked witch bade her. So the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the old woman hobbled out to the stable and cried, Hansel, put out your finger that I may feel if you're getting fat. But Hansel always stretched out a bone, and the old dame, whose eyes were dim, couldn't see it, and thinking always it was Hansel's finger, wondered why he was fattening so slowly. When 4 weeks had passed and Hansel still remained thin, she lost patience and determined to wait no longer. Hi, Gretel, she called to the girl, be quick and get some water. Hansel may be fat or thin, I'm going to kill him tomorrow and cook him. Oh, how the poor little sister sobbed as she carried the water, and how the tears rolled down her cheeks. Kind heaven, help us now, she cried. If only the wild beasts in the wood had eaten us, then at least we should have died together. Just hold your peace, said the old hag. It won't help you. Early in the morning, Gretel had to go out and hang up the kettle full of water and light the fire. First we'll bake, said the old dame. I've heated the oven already and kneaded the dough. She pushed Gretel out to the oven, from which fiery flames were already issuing. Creep in, said the witch, and see if it's properly heated so we can shove in the bread. For when she'd got Gretel in, she meant to close the oven door and let the girl bake that she might eat her up too. But Gretel perceived her intention and said, I don't know how I'm going to do it. How do I get in? You silly goose, said the old hag. The opening's big enough. See, I could get in myself. And she crawled toward it and poked her head into the oven. Then Gretel gave her a shove that sent her right in and shut the iron door and drew the bolt. Gracious, how she yelled! It was quite horrible, but Gretel fled, and the wretched old woman was left to perish miserably. Gretel flew straight to Hansel, opened the little stable door and cried, Hansel, we're free, the old witch is dead. Then Hansel sprang out like a bird out of a cage. When the door is opened, how they rejoiced and fell on each other's necks and jumped for joy and kissed one another. I don't know literally what this phrase, fell on each other's necks, is supposed to mean. It's one that's always confused me. But there you go. And kissed one another. And as they had no longer any cause for fear, they went into the old hag's house, and here they found in every corner of the room boxes with pearls and precious stones. These are even better than pebbles, said Hansel, and crammed his pockets full of them. And Gretel said, I too will bring something home, and she filled her apron full. But now, said Hansel, let's go and get well away from the witch's wood. Not quite sure how they intend to get home. When they had wandered about for some hours, they came to a big lake. We can't get over, said Hansel. I see no bridge of any sort. Yes, and there's no ferry boat either, answered Gretel. But look, there swims a white duck. If I ask her, she'll help us over. And she called out, Here are 2 children, mournful very, seeing neither bridge nor ferry. Take us upon your white back and row us over. Quack, quack. High poetry. It's obviously won the duck over because the duck swims up. The duck swam toward them, and Hansel got on her back and bade his little sister sit behind him. "No," answered Gretel, "we should be too heavy a load for the duck. She shall carry us across separately." The good bird did this, and when they were landed safely on the other side and had gone on for a while, the wood became more and more familiar to them. So she was kind and considerate to the duck. I'm not sure how she thanked the duck apart from giving her some poetry. After they had gone on for a while, the wood became more and more familiar to them, and at length they saw their father's house in the distance. Then they set off to run, and bounding into the room, fell on their father's neck. The man had not passed a happy hour since he had left them in the wood, but the woman had died. Gretel shook out her apron so the pearls and precious stones rolled about the room, and Hansel threw down one handful after the other out of his pockets. Thus all their troubles were ended, and they lived happily ever afterward. My story is done. See, there runs a little mouse. Anyone who catches it may make himself a large fur cap out of it. And that's a story from the Grimm brothers. The weirdest part was that ending. See, there runs a little mouse. Anyone who catches it may make himself a large fur cap out of it. Why would you say that at the end of a story, when the mice have had nothing to do with the story until now? Oh my goodness, that's just so strange. I'm not going to read any more today. They are strange stories though, aren't they? Regardless of who wrote the original ones, all of them have had their strange twists to them. So very peculiar. Weird, odd, peculiar. So some of the stories in the book, just for those of you who are wondering, some of the stories in the book that Andrew Lang acknowledges who the original is told by, whether it's Perrault, whether it's Madame whatever her name is, whether it's the Grimm brothers. And so you could actually find other copies of those stories and see if they're actually anything like the way he's retold them. Other ones he gives no indication where they're from whatsoever, and it doesn't make any difference. They're all equally weird in one way or another. Or we get given facts, like very specific information about something, but the specificity of it has no relevance for the whole of the rest of the story. It's like, why did you tell us that? And then also remembering that these stories, all of the stories he put into the fairy books, the Rainbow Fairy books, all of the stories were in his retellings, were intended to make a collection of books for children. So what was deemed appropriate for children in 1889 is very, very different from what is deemed appropriate for children these days. So like in my mind, when he says children, or when they say children for the target market, yes, read by an adult to the children, but to me that means probably someone anywhere between 4 and 10. And not really the sort of stuff that we put in little kids' books anymore. No, bit strange indeed. So that's it for today. It's the 28th of January. Why am I telling you that? Because on the 30th of January, I will not be reading because I am having a planned power outage here. I'm not going to go along the road to the library and use their internet. And have other people sitting around listening in and interrupting and things like that. That just feels like it's got too much extra involved. So I'm just going to skip next time's stream. But you can see if you go to my schedule, which is here, it will show you that my next stream is skipped, but the one that comes after that, we'll be back to having a normal stream. I'm not quite sure what we're going to read, but we will be reading another book. It won't be the Blue Fairy book. Construction. What they're meant to be doing, we think, is servicing the pole transformer and the wiring that comes into it and goes out of it that's on the power pole that's outside our house. where we live, the main supply lines are overhead. And then when you go down the side roads and stuff like that, a lot of those are underground. Eventually, they've said that the overhead ones in our area will go underground, but that's not a high priority. They've actually stabilized most of the system up here enough that we haven't been getting as many power outages and bad storms. But PJ and I, because you can see the pole transformer out his window. In fact, when we've reported to the power company in the past about if there was an outage in our area and whether or not we can see that the rest of the houses in our general area, not just the immediate houses, whether or not they've got power out, we have been able to use a phone torch or a normal torch and point it at the pole transformer and even tell them that the pole fuse, one of the pole fuses, has blown because there's a particular system that happens, and you can actually see that part of it is broken effectively because something's hit the line and it's caused an outage along the line, and that has tripped the fuse so that we don't have any other problems elsewhere. Yes, power outage, but no other damage. But the actual transformer that's there is quite old, so we're thinking that they're going to replace it. They've been gradually going along and doing that with some of the other ones in the general area. So because it's scheduled, as far as I can tell, the pole itself is fine. They redid the cross trees a while ago because the timber on those was starting to rot, so they fixed that part of it, which included putting in some new insulators and stuff like that. So yeah, at some stage maybe we'll take photos and show you all. I don't know. It'll be interesting to find out if it actually is the transformer replacement or not. They're not one of the really big ones. We have really big ones that are on the side of the road in some places where it's taking larger, it's stepping down power supply to a bigger area. This is a smaller one that's just for a cluster of houses in this bit, and then they carry on the higher power rating further along, and then they go through another small power pole transformer to go to that cluster of houses there, sort of thing. You have less loss of electricity along the way if you keep it at a higher power rating for the main transmission, and then you break it down to the smaller power level that's appropriate for houses. If you run everything through at that lower power rating that houses use, you actually lose a lot of the electricity. It's like electricity in some ways is a little bit like water. If you have a big fat hose or a big pipe pushing lots of water through it, it doesn't get slowed down a lot. Or if you have a little tiny hose and you're pushing a lot of water through it over a long distance, the friction of the surface of that hose against the water that's inside it has a much greater impact on it, and so you lose a lot of the flow. You still get water out at the other end, but you don't get high pressure water at the other end, that sort of thing. So it works in a parallel manner with electricity in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's what's going to be happening here. So I won't be streaming next time, but I will be on my Monday, which is probably your Sunday night. And we will have another book, and I don't know what it is, but hopefully it will be an adventure of some sort. It'll be fun, but I'm not sure which sort of fun it's going to be. So I look forward to seeing you all then, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. It's been lots of fun. Some weird stories. All of you go and check out the VOD and create clips of anything that you think is funny enough or silly enough or strange enough, and then share them.